In regard to this whole issue about the Senate as an institution, and where I said if this nuclear option holds, it's going to destroy the Senate, I think it's very appropriate for us to remember that the Senate is the only institution in our political branch of government that where minority views are protected. And the House of Representatives, a majority, whether it's a Republican majority or a Democrat majority, as long as they stick together, they can do anything they want to, and they can ignore the minority. But in the United States Senate, when it takes a supermajority of 60 to get something done, whether you have a Republican or Democrat minority, that minority is protected, because today when you have 55 Republicans and 45 Democrats, nothing's going to get done here unless it's done in a bipartisan consensus way. And that's what's so very important, that we don't destroy that aspect of the uniqueness of the United States Senate. I yield the floor.
The senator from Missouri.
For the opportunity to speak, I want to continue discussing what my good friend from Iowa was talking about. There is a reason for the Senate. Now, there are times when it's hard to figure out exactly what that reason is with the lack of activity we've seen the last couple of years, but that has really very little to do with the rules of the Senate. It has a lot to do with the Senate not following its regular order, its regular procedures, and in fact, when we've done that, whether it was the highway bill or the Federal Aviation Act or the Farm Bill, we have always produced a successful piece of legislation. The Senate works when you let the Senate work. The Senate works when people are allowed to bring differing points of view to the Senate floor, and frankly, one of the reasons to be in the Senate is to have the ability to not only bring those ideas to the floor, but to have to vote on those ideas, to let the American people know where we stand, to let the people in the states we represent know where we stand. The idea that the Senate is now afraid of the amendment process is a great obstacle to the Senate getting its work done, but another obstacle is constantly talking about changing the Senate rules. The Senate rules have served the Senate well for a long time and served the country well. The Senate rules are what define the Senate in giving individual senators abilities they wouldn't otherwise have. You know, this is the only body like it in the world where a bare majority can't just do whatever it wants to do. If that's the way we want to govern the country, we have one of those bodies already. It's called the House of Representatives, where the majority absolutely rules, where the Rules Committee has 9 members representing the majority and 4 members representing the minority. I was the whip in the House for a long time, the chief vote counter in the House, and I can just tell you 9 always beats 4. It's not just 2 to 1, it's 2 to 1 plus 1. That's a body where the majority has incredible capacity to do whatever the majority wants to do. That is not the way, Madam President, the Senate's supposed to work. And so we started off this year trying to agree on how to move the Senate forward in an agreeable and effective way. And then we're right back every day now hearing that, well, we're going to have to think about changing the rules. When you think about changing the rules, it usually is not a good indication that you're prepared to really get anything done. The 2 leaders, when we started this year, agreed on a plan to make sure that the Senate wouldn't unilaterally change the rules, that they wouldn't break the rules to change the rules. You know, the first thing you would have to do to change the rules is break the rules, because the rules, once the Senate is constituted, can't be changed by just a majority of senators. It takes more than that. We just created 2 new ways for the majority leader, not the minority leader, but for the majority leader to expedite Senate action. They gave new powers to the leader. One of these rules changes passed 78 to 16. The other one passed 86 to 9. These gave the majority ways to consider nominations and legislation and go to conference. And the minority agreed that under certain circumstances that the ability to engage in debate could and would be limited. But now we're back here again having the same discussion, and the only way the majority leader would be able to get what he apparently wants would be to break the rules. There are enough rules being broken, in my view, in Washington right now. And one of the problems that the country faces right now is, frankly, they don't trust their government. And when you look across the board, from the IRS to what happened in Benghazi to what's the NSA and the answers about retaining records, we don't need to yet do another thing to convince people that there's a reason that they should not believe what people in the government say. Let's just look at a few things that the majority leader said right here on the Senate floor over the last couple of years. In January of 2011, January the 27th to be exact, Mr. Reid said, quote, "I agree that the proper way to change the Senate rules is through the procedures established in those rules." And he went on to say, "I will oppose any effort in this Congress or the next to change the Senate rules other than through the regular order." That was January of 2011. Mr. McConnell, in January of this year, said on the Senate floor, January the 24th, "I would confirm that with the majority leader that the Senate would not consider other resolutions relating to any standing order or rules this Congress unless they went through the regular order process." That was Senator McConnell's quote, and in response, Senator Reid said, "That is correct. Any other resolutions related to Senate procedure would be subject to a regular order process, including consideration by the Rules Committee." Now, I'm on the Rules Committee, Madam President, and we're not talking about any rules changes on the Rules Committee, which Senator Reid said in January of this year would have to be part of looking at that. Now, of course, a lot of the discussion is well, the nominations are taking too long. These are important jobs, and there's a reason they take so long, particularly the judicial nominees serve for the rest of their life. They're going to serve well beyond, in most cases, well beyond the president that nominates them, and they have taken a long time for quite a while. I would think that the facts are clear that the Senate is treating President Obama's judicial nominees fairly, and in some ways even better than they treated President Bush's nominees. Already in this Congress, the Senate, in this Congress, the one that began in January, the Senate has approved 22 of the president's lifetime appointments. 22 people on the federal bench for the rest of their life, and that's already happened this year. At a comparable point in President Bush's second term, the Senate had approved only 5 of his judicial nominees. In the last Congress, President Obama had 50% more confirmations than President Bush. 171 of his nominees were confirmed. His predecessor had 119 under similar circumstances, a time when the Senate was also dealing with 2 Supreme Court nominees, who, by the way, also served for life. I think the first term of President Obama, the Senate made the kind of progress you would expect the Senate to make on these important jobs. In fact, President Obama's had more district court confirmations than any president in the previous 8 Congresses. Now, you'd think that would be a pretty good record on the part of the Senate doing its job. You know, the Constitution says that the president nominates, but it says the Senate confirms. And in my view, those are equally important jobs. In fact, you could argue that the last job, the one that actually puts the judge on the bench, is even more important than the first job. Overall, the Senate has confirmed 193 lower court judges under President Obama and defeated only 2. The Washington Post cited the Congressional Review conclusion that from nomination to confirmation, which is the most relevant indicator, President Obama's circuit court nominees were being processed in about 100 days, quicker than President Bush's. President Bush's nominees took about a year, 350 days. President Obama's take about 100 days less than that. And then let's look at the other side of nominations. Now, there is a difference in the executive nominations, I believe, because they only are likely to serve during the term of the president and not exceed that. And I think that creates a slightly different standard, but the process on these nominations has been pretty extraordinary in any view. If anything, the Obama administration has had more nominations considered quicker than the Bush administration. The Secretary of Energy was recently confirmed 97-0. The Secretary of Interior was confirmed 87-11. The Secretary of the Treasury 71-26. Those are substantial votes done in a substantial time. The Commerce Committee that I'm on just this week voted out 3 nominations the President had made with no dissenting votes to report that nomination to the floor. The Director of the Office of Management and Budget was confirmed 96-0. The Secretary of State was confirmed 94-3, only 7 days after the Secretary of State was nominated. Now, members of the Senate knew the Secretary of State pretty well, and it was easy to look at that in a quick way, but it's pretty hard to imagine a Secretary of State that could be confirmed quicker than 7 days after that person was nominated. The administrator for the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services was confirmed 91-7. The chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission was confirmed by a voice vote. Yet in spite of all of that, we're being told by the White House and by others that somehow the Senate's record on these nominations is worthy of an unprecedented rules change, and that rules change would shut out the rights of the minority to fully review and debate, particularly lifetime judicial nominations. The very essence of the constitutional obligation the Senate has is to look at these nominations and decide whether these people should go on the court for the rest of the federal bench for the rest of their life or not. I'm hopeful, Madam President, that the majority leader will keep his commitment to the Senate and to the American people and ensure that we move on from this debate that should have happened and did happen in January. And instead of changing the rules, we do what we're supposed to do and do it in a way that meets our obligations as a Senate and our obligations to the Constitution. Let's not break the rules to change the rules. Let's get on with the important business that's before us rather than going back to the business that we have dealt with months ago. And I would yield the floor.
Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of S-744, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 80, S-744, a bill to provide for comprehensive immigration reform and for other purposes.
Madam President.
Senator from Vermont.
Madam President, I have 8 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent these requests be agreed to and these requests be put in the record.
Without objection.
Madam President, what is the parliamentary situation?
The Senate is on S-744.
And is there a division of time?
There is no such division of time.
Thank you. Madam President, I suggest you have the quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Madam President,
Senator from Iowa.
I ask that the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
I want to visit with my colleagues about border security. It refers to an amendment that I have pending to enhance the bill provisions on border security. I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss why I think my amendment is a good first step at restoring the faith of the American people in government, and that faith has to be restored on the issue of immigration because we promised so much in the 1986 bill of border security and stopping undocumented workers from coming to this country. And so consequently now, the institution of Congress and the executive branch, both because we aren't enforcing existing law, the credibility on immigration is at stake here. And on this issue, the American people have lost faith about whether we're really, at least from the immigration point of view, are we really a nation based on the rule of law? It's no secret that we here in Washington, particularly in the congressional branch, have low approval ratings. A lot of people, especially in recent weeks, wonder about the trust of government. You know, Benghazi, IRS, AP, investigations, all that stuff. They've also lost confidence then in the leaders. They question our ability to protect their privacy. They question our capacity to protect their security. This is especially true when you talk about border security with average Americans. They don't think that we're doing enough. They say we don't need to pass another law. They just don't understand why we cannot stop the flow and simply enforce the laws on the books. To them, it's that simple. It comes up in my town meetings in Iowa. But the bill before us complicates things. It takes a step backwards on an issue that Americans care deeply about. It says we'll legalize millions now. That means millions of undocumented workers. And we'll worry about border security down the road 5 or 10 years. Now, the authors of this document that's before us, the group of 8, say that they're open to improving the bill. Well, my amendment, now before the Senate, does just that. My amendment improves the trigger that jumpstarts the legalization program. It ensures that the border is secure before one person gets legal status under this act. Now, I think the American people have shown that they're very compassionate, not just willing to deal with this issue of 12 million undocumented workers here, but in a lot of other ways. So numerous and well-known we don't even need to mention them. And we've proved that many can come here, can come to terms with the legalization program. But what would say that a legalization program should be tied to border security or enforcement. That's what's very simple for the American people. Secure the borders. Let me give you some examples. Bloomberg recently released a poll in which they asked the following question, quote, Congress is debating changing immigration laws. Do you support or oppose a revision of immigration policy that would provide a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States? Question mark, end of quote. 46% said they'd support. The poll then went on to ask the same respondents about elements in the immigration bill. 85% said that they favored, quote, strengthening border security and creating a system to track foreigners entering and leaving the country, end of quote. So you have 46% saying that they support immigration, but 85% of the same group say it's very necessary to strengthen border security. In Iowa, a poll by the Des Moines Register found that 58% of the respondents were okay with a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants after, and I emphasize the word after, the border is secure. Almost every poll shows the same results. Sure, people would consider a legalization program, but it's almost always tied to the condition of border security. But the American people don't think that we're doing enough to secure the border. In a poll conducted by Anderson Robbins Research and Shaw and Company, 60% of those polled said that the current level of security at the country border is not strict enough, Also, 69% of the respondents also said that they favor requiring completion of a new border security measures first before making other changes in immigration policies. Unfortunately, too many people have been led to believe that this bill will force the Secretary of Homeland Security to secure the border. In fact, it does not guarantee that before legalization. That's why we need to pass my amendment on file now. It's a good first step to ensuring that we stop the flow of undocumented workers coming to this country. We need to prove to the American people that we can do our job. We need to show them that we're committed to security. Bottom line, nobody's system is as it should be. People support reform, but they support reform if we have border security first. I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
President.
Senator from Vermont.
Madam President, I ask consent to call the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
You know, Madam President, it's good that the nation is having this debate on immigration, but I think we ought to talk about what is really involved here. For the last several months, it's actually even before a bill was drafted, people were saying we can't proceed with immigration reform until we do more to secure our borders. Now that we have a bill that takes extraordinary steps to further secure an already strong border, we continue to hear that we must wait. Madam President, it's so easy to wait. Oh, let's wait till next year, or the year after, or the year after that, because then the 100 members of the United States Senate don't have to vote. We can be on everybody's side. Well, that's not why we're elected. We're elected to vote yes, vote no. Let's start moving forward and stand up to vote, because when you say we have to wait for more security, that ignores the facts. We have been pouring billions of dollars into border security for years. Billions. Keep this in mind. Sometimes we argue $15, $20, $30 million to help educate our children. That becomes a big issue. We put billions of dollars into border security. Since the Senate last considered immigration reform in 2006 and 2007, we've made enormous strides on border security. And this bill takes even more steps to prevent and deter illegal immigration. We can talk about philosophy and we can talk about things people have heard. I'd like to just talk about facts. They may be inconvenient to some who don't want to have immigration reform, but the facts speak for themselves. The Border Patrol has doubled in the past 10 years. It now has more than 21,000 agents. That's more than any time in its history. Under the Obama administration, they have 21,000 agents, more than they've ever had under either Democratic or Republican administrations. The Department of Homeland Security has deployed additional technology and aircraft, hundreds of miles of fencing along the southern border. And then we talk about illegal crossings. Here's a fact. Illegal border crossings are near 40 years lows under this administration because fewer people are trying to cross. In 2005, Border Patrol apprehended more than 1.1 million individuals who unlawfully crossed the border. 2012, that number is down to a third, roughly 365,000. And at the same time, deportations, we all know, are at record high levels. But here's one of the things we should talk about. People ignore the fact we spend more money on enforcing our immigration and custom laws than we do on all our other federal law enforcement agencies put together. That, for those who care about law enforcement, that's kind of a striking number. So we have done enforcement first. But this legislation goes even further to build on what's been a successful record. As Chairman Copper of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee and I relayed a letter to our colleagues yesterday. In fact, I asked unanimous consent that our letter be placed in the record at the end of my statement.
Without objection.
We point out that the bill appropriates up to another $6.5 billion to secure the border. It authorizes another 3,500 Customs and Border Protection officers. It expands border security and the use of technology at the border. I mean, this is not a bill that ignores enforcement. It expands it. It increases the already strict criminal penalties against those unlawfully crossing the border. It provides additional resources for their criminal prosecution. And it sets clear statutory goals. The prevention of 90% of illegal entries and persistent surveillance of our entire border. And if DHS doesn't meet these goals within 5 years, the bill establishes a bipartisan commission to develop further concrete plans and provides an additional $2 billion to carry out these plans. Now, some say, well, I've got a better plan. Well, come on. Border and the needs change all the time. We build in flexibility to meet these needs. And the bill sets tough border security triggers. In fact, before DHS can register any undocumented individuals for provisional status, it has to provide Congress with 2 detailed plans laying out exactly how it's going to meet statutory goals, a comprehensive strategy, and another specific to fencing. I mean, this is the toughest piece of legislation on security of our borders that has ever been before the United States Senate. And the Department of Homeland Security can issue green cards to these individuals for 10 years, and even then only after 4 triggers are satisfied. Comprehensive border security strategy is substantially deployed. The fencing strategy is substantially deployed. The fencing strategy is substantially deployed, completed. A mandatory electronic employment verification system is established for all employers. An electronic exit system based on machine-readable travel documents is in place at airports and securities, and even then, we added more during the Judiciary Committee's markup of this bill. We adopted an amendment offered by Senator Grassley that expanded the bill's 90% effectiveness rate to the entire southern border, not just high-risk sectors. So those who say they want more security, what we got here is virtually impossible to have more security. I think we might ask, are you saying you don't want any immigration bill? You know, this is like debates we've had, and I use the example of the work we did to bring about peace in Northern Ireland during the Clinton administration. Former senator, former majority leader, this body's Senator George Mitchell did heroic efforts, along with others on both the Protestant and Catholic side in Northern Ireland. And there were some that said, well, we can't have any peace agreement until we do not have a single act of violence. And I said, okay. And Senator Mitchell said, and President Clinton said, so in other words, you're going to let one person, disgruntled person on either side, veto any peace agreement. Well, let us not say that we'll have no immigration bill until not one person crosses our border illegally. That is making the perfect the enemy of the good. And it means we'll never have it. You know, I was pleased that the committee also looked at 2 border-related amendments that I offered with Senator Cornyn, the Leahy-Cornyn amendments. I mention this because there are tens of amendments that were bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans alike. I offered this with Senator Cornyn that prohibits land border crossing fees, but another that provides DHS with additional flexibility how it spends the bill's fencing fund. Again, knowing that what we do today, what we want today may be different a few years from now. Incidentally, I might say parenthetically, the amendment I offered to Senator Cornyn to stop border crossing fees on either the southern border or the northern border, saying we're going to turn our customs agents into toll collectors. Well, I live an hour's drive from the Canadian border. We go back and forth like it's another state. The distinguished presiding officer lives in a state that borders Canada. She knows what it's like going back and forth, and she also knows how important that is to the economy of her state and my state, just as it is to Canada. We ought to luxuriate in the fact that Canada is such a friendly neighbor, and the relationships we have with it. Why, some of us are even related to people who have Canadian ancestry. I've been married to a woman whose parents came from Canada. She was born in the United States. We've been married for almost 51 years. I'm delighted that Canadians come across our border and settle in Vermont. But I'm also working on another amendment for Senate consideration regarding the use of vehicle checkpoints in the 100-mile border zone. Given all of this, I don't know why we're talking about border security. We do that in this bill. We massively increase the money, the agents, the technology direct to the border. And this is in addition to the billions, and it is billions of dollars, we already spend each year. Some of the same people who want more security, the same people say we're spending too much money in the federal government. Well, short of putting up a steel wall, it's hard to imagine what more we could do to physically stop people from crossing. As Chairman Carper said, you build a 25-foot wall, I'll show somebody with a 26-foot ladder. We know people will still come because, and let's be serious for a moment, Madam President, a fence does not address the root causes of illegal immigration. People come here looking for jobs, and American businesses hire them because they'll do the jobs nobody else will. And yes, some come here to join their families because the current backlogs for family-sponsored green cards would otherwise force them to wait years. If we're serious about stopping illegal immigration, we have to do more than build a bigger, longer, higher fence. That won't work. We have to create legal ways for people to enter the country, want to come here for work, and to join family members. And then we have to make it harder for people to find work if they do not use legal avenues by requiring a nationwide employment verification system, E-Verify. Some have called this a virtual fence. And by increasing penalties on employers who hire undocumented workers. This bill does exactly that. Distinguished senior senator from New York, Senator Schumer, talks about riding his bicycle around Brooklyn and seeing people who are probably undocumented and contractors coming up to them and saying, I'll hire you for $15 a day, and they have to take the jobs. Now, if we had real teeth, as our bill does, real penalties employers hire undocumented workers, they would instead have to hire those who are legal, have to pay at least minimum wage, and have to put money into Social Security and so on. It makes a big difference. As one of our, as Grover Norquist said in his testimony, our bill, if adopted, would improve the finances of our nation. But more than that, this legislation provides workable, flexible, affordable, humane solutions. It's tough, it's fair, it's practical. Now, I welcome additional ideas how to enhance border security and public safety. I'd like people to start bringing up their amendments, vote them up or down. But our goal must be to secure the border, not seal it. And as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I will oppose efforts that impose unrealistic, excessively costly, overly rigid, inhumane, or ineffective border security measures. And I will oppose efforts to modify the triggers in ways that could unduly delay or prevent the earned legalization path. We've waited too long already. And that includes the amendment offered by my friend from Iowa, Senator Grassley, which would significantly delay even the initial registration process for the 11 million undocumented individuals in this country. Bottom line is this, Madam President. The pathway to citizenship must be earned, but it also must be attainable. Citizenship must be earned, but it also must be attainable. And let's not forget that bringing 11 million people out of the shadows is not only the moral thing to do, it helps keep this country safe so we know who is here and we can focus on our resources on those who actually do pose a threat. I don't often quote the Wall Street Journal editorial board, but I will quote it here. They said, those who claim we must secure the border first ignore the progress already made, because their real goal isn't border security. It's to use border security as an excuse to kill immigration reform. We need immigration reform. It's a moral issue. It speaks to the greatness of our country, but it's also a national security issue and a public safety issue. Attempts to undermine immigration reform may come in the guise of promoting border security, but I'd ask the United States Senate, don't be fooled by that. 76 former state attorneys general recently wrote, put simply, practical, comprehensive reform to our federal immigration laws will make us all safer. These are 76 men and women who had to enforce our laws. But we must fix our broken immigration system once and for all. As I've said many times on this floor, I think of my maternal grandparents coming to Vermont from Italy and making Vermont a better state with the jobs they created. And their grandson became a United States Senator. I think of my wife's parents coming from the province of Quebec, bringing their French language, but also learning English. And my wife was born in Vermont as a result of that, but I think of her family, expanded family, father, uncle, others, creating so many jobs in Vermont and making Vermont better. And every one of us can tell stories like that. Let's not forget those people. Let's not say that what worked for our ancestors is no longer available. Let's speak as the conscience of the nation. 100 senators can be the conscience of the nation, sometimes are. We were in the Violence Against Women Act. We can be now on the immigration bill. And I ask unanimous consent that my full statement and additions be placed in the record as though read.
Without objection.
Madam President, I see my good friend Deanna on the floor, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Indiana.
Madam President, I thank Senator from Vermont and appreciate what he has said about all this. This is a debate that we need to undertake, and we are doing so. And we're doing it in a way that the Senate, in my previous experiences, has essentially dealt with legislation. We have brought it to the floor. It has come through the regular process. The committee has held extensive hearings on the issue. There is a national debate going on. We're hearing from our constituents back at home. We are following. I'm not on the committee that has jurisdiction here, but we're following it carefully in terms of what has been presented, the bill that has been drafted, the amendments that have been offered, which ones have succeeded, which ones haven't. This is a major issue which deserves and is getting, unlike most of what has happened here in the last couple of years, is getting a thorough debate with opportunities to offer amendments, with opportunities to work to find ways to address concerns about the current legislation that is before us. And that is why I voted for the motion to proceed. This is an issue that needs to be discussed, and hopefully in a system that we know is broken. I think there's pretty much unanimous consent on the fact that our current immigration system is full of flaws. It has not achieved what was promised when the initial legislation was passed, and it needs to be fixed because the status quo just simply perpetuates and adds to the problem that we have with illegal immigration and all the impact on our country and the distrust of the American people that we're going to come forward with a credible legislation this time to address the real problems. So I'm pleased that we are having this debate. Now, we are a nation of immigrants. It is part of what has defined our country from the very beginning. It's a rich history. While all of those who have come to our shores over the decades may have different stories and a different journey, most share a common goal. They want the opportunity to live in a free society. They want to advance economically. They want to pursue the American dream. They want to provide for their children and their children's children the freedoms and the opportunity that exists in America in a way that exists in very few, if any, other places. The American dream is a reality that is available for people to achieve, given the opportunity and given hard work and success. I'm the son of an immigrant. My mother's family came here to the United States legally in search of a better life and better opportunities, not just for themselves, but for their children and their children's children in generations to follow. And what my mother learned and passed down to her children is that with these freedoms granted to us as American citizens come responsibilities. We have the responsibility to cherish and defend our Constitution. We have the responsibility to be engaged citizens in our communities. We have the responsibility to vote and take part in the electoral process. And hopefully we have people agree that we have the responsibility to come to the aid of our neighbors in need. We have been and hopefully will continue to be a compassionate country, a country that believes all human beings are created equal and that our rights are endowed not by a king, not by a president, not by a government, but by God. In America, it doesn't matter where you come from or what your last name may be. If given the opportunity and the chance, you can succeed. And that's what sets us apart from so many other countries. That is what makes us a shining light, a beacon to the rest of the world. And it is that light that attracts so many to our shores with hopes and dreams of a better future. During my time as ambassador to Germany, Colin Powell, then Secretary of State, made many visits. One of those visits was a stop on the way back from a trip to India. And as we were riding from the airport to his first appointment, he shared with me something that I think pretty much says it all about the world's view of America. We see people holding demonstrations, protests against America for this or that. He said, but you know, as I was traveling in the motorcade down the street, Main Street, there was an Indian citizen there with a huge sign in big bold letters. It said, Yankee, go home. And in parentheses, right underneath those bold letters, it said, and please take me with you. I think that little story illustrates how much of the world views America, a place they would like to get to. And so as we address this issue, it's important, I think, that we understand that this country is a magnet. It is a magnet for people to come and fulfill their dreams, to make their lives better and their children's lives better. But if we're a country that cannot have an orderly process of legal immigration, we are going to lose the support of the American people, most all of us immigrants at one point, for bringing people into our country if they continue to learn that those who come the right way, the legal way, have to stand in line for 10, 12, 15, 20 years, hoping to win the lottery, hoping to be those select people that are chosen. Those opportunities dwindling simply because we are being overrun through an illegal process. And so that's why it is important that we reform, we address this issue, and we make the necessary reforms. As I said earlier, it's an indisputable fact that our current immigration system has failed. It's failed the citizens of this country, and it's failed those who have been standing in line for years trying to become eligible for immigration through the legal process. Today, we have roughly 11 million undocumented individuals living in our country. Approximately 40% of those who are here illegally arrive legal on a legal basis for a temporary time. But once having come to our shores, they have kind of melted, absorbed themselves into our citizenship and country and not returned. That is an issue. That is a problem. And this bill addresses that, and we need to address that. We need to have a certified system in place that works, not promises, not words on pieces of paper, but a system that has the credibility to work, that when we grant people temporary status to come here to study, come here to visit, come here to see relatives, come here for whatever reason on a temporary basis, we know who comes in and we know who goes out and we know those who stay, and we take action on that. That is simply a logical, legal way of having a system that the American people can trust and believe in. Now, one of the major issues here is our southern border and securing those borders. I had the opportunity to spend 3 days on the border, all the way from the Pacific Ocean, where the borderline hits the Pacific Ocean in Southern California, all the way across the Southern California border and all the way across the Arizona border. And so I had a pretty good look at this. As ranking member on the Homeland Security Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, I wanted to find out how we were spending our money, what kind of success we were having, what the problems were, how we should better address our resources in terms of addressing this problem. And it was instructive, and I urge my colleagues to take the opportunity to do the same. As a result of that, despite efforts to make that border secure, secure is not the right word to define where we are now. So an issue before us is, what do we do to make us more secure in a way that can convince the American people and the people we represent that this time, we have in place a process which will secure that border. We went through this in 1986. Ronald Reagan proposed immigration reform. I voted for it. At the time, we had 3 million illegal immigrants. The promise in that legislation was that we would secure the border. We would solve the problem of illegal immigration. Obviously, we didn't. And today we have 11 million and perhaps counting. Now, it is appropriate, I think, to say the border is more secure than it was then. We have over the years, and particularly in later years here, with the surge of illegal immigrants coming into our country, we've taken significant steps. Border Patrol agents, sophisticated technology, a whole range of things that we have invested. Money we've invested, people we've invested, policies we've invested to make that border more secure. But you can't right now truthfully come down here and say the border is secure, and you can say we're going to make it secure, here's how we're going to do it, but I think we need something that is credible so that the American people simply say, well, how do we believe you're going to be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and say, well, I know we told you it was going to be secure, I know we still have a significant problem, but we'll get it better next time. We don't want to repeat that mistake. If that happens again, I think it'll be a long time before we are able to come down with a sensible reform proposal. So clearly there is work to do there, and it's going to be difficult for me to support a bill that doesn't put in place something that is credible relative to our ability to secure that border. We cannot ignore this problem. We can't ignore the fact that people continue to stay in our country illegally or cross our borders illegally. The status quo is not working. It encourages illegal immigrants to come across the border, which is why we need this debate, why we need reforms to our current broken system, and why we need to assure the American people that we're going to work to repair this broken system. It's critical for our economic growth, it's critical for securing our borders, and it's critical for strengthening our national security. That is why I supported the motion to proceed to this debate on this important issue. Immigration reform needs to take place in an open, fair, and thorough debate with the input of the American people, and I'm certainly hearing from many of them in my state. I do have to say I have serious concerns with the current text of the legislation that has come out of the Judiciary Committee, and I believe this bill needs to be improved before I could support it. I'm particularly concerned about the focus on improving the border security measures, making sure, as I said, we don't make the same mistakes we made in 1986. We must take steps now to secure it before we consider granting legal status to illegal immigrants. Additionally, I want to work with my colleagues to improve the employer verification program, which I think is essential to dealing with the problem, and also our exit system measures, which I discussed before, about the people who come legally for a temporary stay and then we don't know where they are because we don't know that they go back home. So that I hope over the days ahead, as we that we can live up to our reputation of being the most deliberative body in the world. People say, why don't you get more things done? Well, it's either one of two answers to that. One is we don't bring bills to the floor and offer opportunity to debate in an open way. But the second is that this is exactly what we need to do. And on an issue of this importance, we clearly need this, and I'm pleased that that process is going to go forward here. But let's not rush to a decision. Let's do it right. Let's not stand up and declare that every amendment, if it doesn't fit what the current bill before us addresses, is a poison pill that is simply being offered because members don't want anything to pass. I don't fall in that category. I don't think we should have poison pills either. But a lot of these amendments that I think go to addressing the problem that we face in terms of the inadequacies of the bill before us, a lot of those need fixing, and a lot of those are genuine. And a lot of those are offered by people who would like to get to a credible, workable, necessary immigration reform legislation. But if the sponsors of the bill or the supporters of the bill are simply going to declare every amendment that potentially has the ability to pass as a poison pill, and the only intent of the members offering the amendment is to kill the bill, that's not constructive, and that's not how we should go forward. So, Madam President, let's make sure that what we do delivers on the promises that we are making to secure our borders first, to deal with employer verification, the exit strategy, and to provide that important provisions to ensure a legal immigration system that can benefit our country and which is the story of America. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues to improve this legislation. I would like to see legitimate, real, effective border control, a number of other features, but I'd like to get our system reformed because the current system is not working. Madam President, with that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Arizona.
Madam President, I appreciate the opportunity for all members of this body to participate in a debate and amendments and discussion of the bill that was reported out through the Judiciary Committee in the regular order. And if my colleagues have any doubt about what I and my colleagues on this so-called Group of 8